Stay 3 steps behind me. Don't speak unless someone talks to you. And please don't embarrass me in front of the executives. Those were my husband Richard's exact words before we entered his company's annual gala. For 5 years, Richard had treated me like an unemployed housewife, someone he was almost ashamed to be seen with. He had no idea who I really was. He believed my frequent trips were nothing more than low-level logistics consulting. He never bothered to ask questions because he had already decided I wasn't important. Tonight he planned to use the gala to impress Apex Global's executives and secure the promotion he had wanted for years. As we entered the Grand Hyatt ballroom, Richard immediately changed. The man who had insulted me in the car suddenly became charming and confident. He shook hands with executives, laughed loudly, and bragged about projects he barely deserved credit for. Then he led me toward a quiet corner beside the buffet. "Stay here," he whispered. "I'm going to talk to the board. Don't wander around. I need everyone focused on me tonight." Then he walked away. I stood quietly with a glass of water, watching him boast to senior executives. When someone asked about his wife, Richard laughed. "Natalie? She's just a homebody. She prefers staying out of the big leagues." I said nothing. He had spent 5 years underestimating me. He still had no idea what I actually did for a living. Then the ballroom suddenly went silent. The main doors opened. Raymond Vance, the billionaire founder and CEO of Apex Global, entered with his security team and senior executives. Richard immediately straightened his jacket. This was the moment he had been waiting for. But then Raymond looked across the ballroom. His eyes stopped on me. He froze. For a few seconds he didn't move. Then he pushed past Richard and walked directly toward me. He stopped in front of me, stood at attention, and said, "Lieutenant Colonel Vance reporting, ma'am. I've finally found you." The entire room went silent. And Richard's face turned completely white. "My name is Natalie Walker. I was 42 years old. For 15 years, I had served as a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, specializing in strategic logistics and intelligence operations. To the military, I was an experienced officer trusted with complex missions and critical supply operations. But to my husband, I was just his unemployed wife. When Richard and I married, I intentionally kept my military career private. After years of demanding assignments, I wanted a quiet personal life. Richard knew I did remote logistics consulting and traveled occasionally. He simply assumed it was ordinary office work. His arrogance never allowed him to imagine that my career was anything more. Over the years, his condescension became outright disrespect. He mocked my intelligence, dismissed my work, and treated me like an accessory he needed to hide from his corporate friends. Tonight, he thought he was one conversation away from becoming a vice president. He had no idea that the woman he had ordered to stand quietly in the corner was someone his billionaire CEO already knew and respected. And now everyone in that ballroom was about to learn the truth. Raymond Vance rarely attended regional company galas. That was why his arrival tonight immediately changed the atmosphere. Executives whispered excitedly as the billionaire CEO entered the ballroom. Richard's eyes lit up. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. If he could impress Vance tonight, his long-awaited promotion to vice president might finally become reality. Richard pushed through the crowd, ignoring annoyed looks from other executives. He straightened his jacket, fixed his most confident smile, and stepped directly into Vance's path. "Mr. Vance, what an honor. I'm Richard Reed, Senior Project Manager." He extended his hand. Vance didn't take it. He didn't even look at Richard. Instead, the CEO slowly scanned the ballroom. Then his eyes stopped. On me. His expression changed instantly. The cold, distant look disappeared. Vance stared at me as if he had just seen someone he never expected to find. Without saying a word, he walked around Richard. My husband stood there with his hands still hanging in the air. The room became strangely quiet. Vance walked straight toward the back corner where I was standing. Executives moved aside, eager to see who had captured the billionaire's attention. Richard hurried after him. "Mr. Vance, sir, that's just the buffet area. My wife is over there. She's just Vance ignored him. He stopped a few feet in front of me. Then something happened that made the entire ballroom freeze. The billionaire CEO stood perfectly straight. He raised his hand in a formal military salute. "Lieutenant Colonel Walker." His voice carried across the silent room. He lowered his hand and offered me his hand with genuine respect. I finally found you, ma'am. I've been trying to locate your official contact information for nearly 2 years. A wave of whispers moved through the crowd. Vance continued. 7 years ago in Kandahar, our convoy came under attack. You were the tactical commander who coordinated the air support and extraction that got 32 soldiers out safely. He paused. I was one of them. Richard's face went blank. Vance looked at me with unmistakable respect. I was only a young logistics captain at the time. Your leadership that night changed the way I understood operations under pressure. He glanced around the ballroom. That experience influenced everything I built at Apex Global. Then he looked directly at me. I owe you more than I can ever repay. Richard looked like he could barely breathe. The woman he had called a simple housewife was a decorated army officer. The woman he had hidden in the corner had once saved his CEO's life. Vance then made an announcement that stunned everyone even more. Lieutenant Colonel Walker, Apex Global is restructuring its global logistics and risk division. We need someone who understands high-pressure operations. He smiled. I want you on our executive board as Chief Logistics Officer. The offer is yours if you want it. I smiled politely. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Vance. I'm currently moving into senior advisory work, but I'd be happy to discuss it. Vance nodded. Then his attention shifted toward Richard. And who is this? Richard opened his mouth. I answered calmly. Richard Reed. He's a senior project manager here. I paused. And my husband. Another pause. At least for now. The room went silent again. I looked at Richard. Before you arrived, Richard told me to stay 3 steps behind him, keep quiet, and make sure I didn't embarrass him in front of the executives. I looked back at Vance. He believed I was an inconvenience to his career. Vance's expression hardened. You told a decorated lieutenant colonel to hide in the corner? Richard swallowed. Vance turned toward his chief legal officer. Start a complete internal audit of Richard Reed's department tonight. Richard's eyes widened. Review every major project from the last 3 years. Verify who actually did the work. Check his performance reports and determine whether he took credit from junior employees. The legal officer nodded. And if you find any serious ethics violations, terminate his employment immediately. Richard grabbed the edge of a nearby table. Mr. Vance, please. It was a misunderstanding. I didn't know who she was. Then he turned toward me. Natalie, tell him. Tell him I was joking. I stared at him calmly. For 5 years, I had tolerated his insults, his arrogance, and his constant attempts to make himself feel important by making me feel small. I had stayed quiet because I didn't need to prove my strength. Now I finally spoke. I'm not telling him anything, Richard. My voice was calm. You made your opinion of me very clear. I reached into my clutch and pulled out an envelope. I had prepared it days earlier. Then I placed it against his chest. These are divorce papers. Richard stared at the envelope. I continued. You were worried about protecting your corporate image. I stepped back. Now you can protect it without me. The ballroom remained completely silent. The internal audit later uncovered years of inflated performance reports and evidence that Richard had repeatedly taken credit for work done by junior employees. Apex Global terminated him. His reputation in the industry collapsed soon after. 6 months later, our divorce was finalized. And I accepted Raymond Vance's offer. I became Senior Vice President of Strategic Logistics at Apex Global while continuing my senior military responsibilities. On my first morning in my new executive office, I stood beside the windows and looked across the city. For years, I had allowed Richard's insecurity to make me smaller. I thought staying silent was the same as keeping the peace. I finally understood the difference. Real peace comes from knowing your worth. Real strength doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes, it simply waits for the right moment to speak. And when that moment comes, you don't have to prove anything. The truth speaks for itself. What would you have done in my position? Would you have confronted Richard earlier, or would you have stayed quiet and let the truth reveal itself? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the next one. Thanks for watching.